So as we kick off this session, I'm going to give you the mic where you can introduce yourself and what it is that you do. So we'll start with Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, all. When my friend doctor was talking, I thought I should chime in, but I'll chime in during the session. So my name is Andrew Mutha Kabeke. I'm the CEO for Safaricom Money Transfer Services Limited. It's different from M-Pesa. So what it does, it deals with international payments, global payments, and remittance in the country and out of the country. And yeah, that's what it does. I'm also an author. I have a book that I've authored called Unsilenced, among many other things. Yes, thank you.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Kosen, Kenta. I'm principal at Antler East Africa. I have not written any books. Yeah.
Getting there.
Just tweets. Yeah, so my background is legal and management consulting, and basically now to speak on Antler and what we do, we are an early stage VC and venture builder. And so where we sit is basically at the earliest, supporting founders at the earliest stages of ideation. So our spectrum of founders is from people who are, you could be a domain expert with a very clear understanding of a problem you'd like to solve. Even if the idea isn't fully formed, we'd be able to support you through our program. Alternatively, you could also be a very early stage startup with perhaps an early stage prototype MVP in market, some insights, and just needing to tighten up elements of your business. So we find you where you are at this earliest stage, and basically our goal is to be the first ticket. And we're supporting both tech and tech-enabled businesses, and just our goal is just to support the most ambitious, brilliant founders solving problems on the continent.
Thank you for that introduction. So as we kick off our questions, I'll give you guys a little bit of context, right? So myself and Kosen actually know each other. And we encountered each other when I first decided to move from the UK to Kenya and launch a startup, because at the time the Antler program was a really, really good fit. So my question to you is, based on how many returnees that you see, how many people who might not have lived in the diaspora but have worked, across the world, what is it that shapes how they build and how they innovate, and why do you think that they kind of stand out in the market?
I'd say the biggest thing is probably perspective. I think one challenge, and that I'd say is also something that we also need to check ourselves as investors. It's even people building here, it's harder to envision them winning at the global stage. Like a common question probably if you've been trying to talk to investors is, you're building here, it's a global solution, and it's like, why do you think you're going to be able to compete at that level, right? And there are challenges, and we'll probably get deeper into that, but I think what the diaspora could bring is now that, number one, just that ambition, the fact that you're coming from markets maybe where you have seen a lot more success stories, so you can even envision yourself winning at that, to that extent, to that degree. Also a lot more access as well to resources as well, and that could be even in the form of capital. I think raising on the continent here, there's always that, I'd say, local discount, just by virtue of just the difficulty of building and scaling in this market. And so again, founders have to work twice as hard just to move ahead compared to their equivalents in the foreign market. So just having people who are coming in with also those that access, that level of networks, access to also global talent, just gives them an edge. But I will caveat that with the fact that a common thing we say at Antler is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So if you're coming in, the danger maybe diaspora might have, and something you need to check yourself, is that belief that things that work in other markets will obviously work here, and that's coming from a solution mindset that this is a perfect solution, why wouldn't people would be crazy not to use it. So you need to check yourself whether you actually you're going the right way, which is you're really focusing on the problem first. And the reality is, if you're coming from the diaspora market, there's a good chance there's some local context that you might be lacking that you'd need to bolster. So I think there's some humility that also needs to come from across the board, that there also needs to be that understanding that there are things I don't understand or fully comprehend about the customer segment I'm targeting, and I need to take time to understand it better, and maybe also bolster myself with local talent as well. So really big thing we do, even as we do bring or leverage diaspora talent, is can we find them the right complementary pieces so the founding teams are actually able to navigate the markets they're exploring.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Kosen. And obviously, as someone who's kind of worked alongside Antler, I think there is a large part of developing how well you know that market when you come from abroad, right? Because you've not been there for a while and you might not understand the dynamics. As the record stands, they did not invest in me. But got the exposure, guys, got the networks. Brilliant. So I'm going to throw that question back to you, Andrew. Safaricom is a global company. You attract global talent. What is it do you see when you find returnees kind of come back home?
So thanks. In terms of, first let me comment on what you commented on, then comment on that question. So one of the major things that happens is there's a notion and a logic that Africa is way behind. And Africa being way behind, too many things don't work in Africa. There's a story I saw on Facebook, on LinkedIn recently, someone saying that they were pleasantly surprised to come into Kenya and actually find things work, payments work. Cash is one of the payments that is not really used a lot. And then the person then went on to write a long story about how they thought UK was better. They thought that they'll come to Kenya and teach people things, and shocking to them discover that you actually been taught. So I think to his point is to say that the key is, number one, is to understand who are you solving the problem for, right? I think there's that mismatch in terms of you just think because we saw buses, and allow me to use your company checkups, because you saw buses that are providing medical services on the road, that it will definitely work in Africa because there's a need. Then shock until you discover guys in Africa have traditional medicines, they don't really care about your medicine. This is an example. So it's important to understand that. Now, in terms of what we see from returnees, there are two positives to it, and then there's also negatives. So the positive side of it is the fact that then you come with different experience. Someone who has worked outside the country also has a broader view. Because you remember, you're a stranger. You left this country, you've gone to establish yourself in another country, you become a professional. There's a lot of things you learn. Resilience, you learn a lot how to navigate some in foreign land, people looking at you like you look like, oh, sorry for this word, a black, that other word which I will not use here. And to them they're thinking, you look strange. So a friend of mine in the US was telling me when she went there to work that she was telling them, when they say, you speak strangely, she turns and says, so do you. I mean, then, so when they say, your English sounds weird, he says, unasema nini? I have no idea. Just turn the conversation, and over time then got to that respect. And so that kind of a person coming to the country, then you find that they also have a bigger perspective of how to handle people, how to work with people, how to look at different things in a different manner. So that's what you see. On the negative side is what you have said. There's need to be humble. And the fact of being humble is the fact that don't think because I worked in the UK, no offense to you or to anyone, that I'm better than the person here locally. Or don't think because I carry an accreditation from Harvard University, the degree here in Nairobi University does not work. So there are those two perspectives to it. So the positive side is you have a lot of experience. Negative side is you have a lot to learn. So that's the response to that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. No offense was taken. But no, the biggest lesson I learned building back home is localization is so important. I came with my toolbox of British ways of solving British problems, and I was humbled very, very quickly. I work in the retail industry, so you can imagine how traditional things are done in that industry. So lesson number one for me was actually taking the time to understand whether the problem I came to solve was actually the problem. And 9 times out of 10, when you're building a business, it isn't, because you have your biases as a founder, but it's your responsibility to figure out what is the actual problem, and is it that painful? Is someone willing to pay for it? So now to move on to around kind of building a talent pipeline, right? So you have these returnees that have come home with great ideas, with their accents and not understanding, the market. How do they localize? Like once they get here, what should they be doing? How should they go about figuring out what it is that they're building?
Yeah, I think it was a doctor that talked about the customer journey and not passing it off. And I think that's just the thing. We run a 10-week program, at the end of which we intend to invest in as many viable businesses that come out of it. And the thing is, we try and give as much time that the answers aren't going to be found in secondary research, they're not going to be found in reports. Your answers are going to be found around actually engaging with your customers, right? So it's actually finding ways to actually extract information. And I don't know if anybody has, I evangelize this book so much, they need to give me shares, but the mom test. I don't know if anybody has come across the mom test, but it's also a matter of asking questions the right way. The risk is always, especially when you've fallen in love with what you want to build, you're going to go to people and say, hey, I have this great thing, would you pay for a solution that does X, Y, Z? And the reality is you're going to get a lot of false positives, because provided there's no commitment or need for them to give you a single shilling, a single dollar, I guess in this forum I need to say a pound, to give you anything, as long as that's not there, they're not incentivized to tell you the truth. And again, culturally, if people just, the minute you tell me, this is my solution, would you buy it? You've exposed your ego. I know exactly what answer you want to get. So it's very easy for, I will tell you, yeah, this sounds great. Yeah, I'd love it. And then when it's time to actually pay, nobody actually comes through. So there's a matter of also asking questions the right way. And it needs to be less around you and your product and why it's amazing, and a lot more around, hey, tell me about your customer journey. So what are you doing now to solve it? How do you feel about the way you're solving it now? Is it actually in fact painful? They're less incentivized to lie when you're asking them about them and their experience. The minute you bring yourself into it and you expose your ego, there's a very good chance that people will tell you the wrong thing. So it's about spending a lot of time with your customer, really engaging with them, but then also, again, asking the right questions so that you actually get meaningful insights. The biggest risk is to spend the next 5 to 7 years of your life building something that the market doesn't want or need. I think that's like a huge waste of like really talented people. So you really want to pick your shot. Yeah, I think that's what I'd say. Or maybe also being slick, because I know sometimes, I mean, I don't know how good your Kiswahili has gotten now since coming back.
It's catching strays.
Yeah, no. I mean, you also need to be creative, I guess. And that's why I think maybe getting the right co-founders, getting the right team, getting people to help. Because, yeah, for instance, if you're dealing with retailers, dealing with mom and pop shops, the kiosks, like in the estates, yeah, probably you need to speak to them in their language in ways they understand, even as you ask the right questions. So can you also be really smart about how you engage them, finding the right resources? So everything is just about getting creative as you get very close to your customer.
No, thank you for that. So my Swahili is about a 5 out of 10.
Mine is also bad. To be clear, my Kiswahili is also terrible. I've been informed, so there's no shorts. It's
No, that was really powerful. I guess the best piece of advice I received as a founder was never walk into a sales pitch pitching a product. You walk in to interview your customer and find out whether your product is actually going to meet their need, right? Because you might be giving them, so the way I view this is, when a problem is that painful, a customer needs a painkiller, not a vitamin, right? And if you come in pitching them a vitamin, they're just going to be like, no, not interested, you're wasting my time, and you'll go around in circles. But if you actually find out what their symptoms are in that sales pitch, you can then be like, maybe my product is not going to meet what it is that they want, but then I can have a second session. So we call them discovery sessions in Dark. So yeah, my little gem for you all. So moving on, so now you've come into the country, you have this business, it's thriving, and now the team is growing, it's scaling, right? How do you attract the best talent? Because when you reach scale, you need the best people. And we sometimes split this up into A players and B players. Working in such a big company where you have a mixture of different types of people, what advice would you give around attracting really good talent in Kenya, across Africa?
Okay, thanks. So before I say that, you say that you're interviewing the customer. I think it's actually the opposite. Anytime you meet a customer, you're the one being interviewed. Literally, think about it. When you go for a job interview, you're being interviewed to be hired. So ideally, when you meet a customer, you want the customer to buy from you. So the customer is interviewing you. So whichever way, remember, you have to do your sales pitch, actually like you want the job. So like just change slightly change what you're saying. In terms of then how do you attract the right talent, the most important thing that you have to think about is, yes, you have set yourself up, is the why. The people buy into your why. People buy into your purpose, right? So if you don't have a strong why, if you don't have a strong purpose, you don't get the right people launching to work for you. If anyone who has ever met James Mwangi, when Mwangi tells you about the story of African Resilience and Recovery Plan, you'll work for him for free. Literally, because he's so passionate about what he wants to do and how he's going to do it that you just fall in love with it. Turn and meet Peter Ndegwa from Safaricom PLC. When he talks about his purpose of transforming lives, he's so strong that you start seeing yourself with solutions. You start seeing yourself doing things within the organization to get you to transform lives. Now, as they say, you won't bluff your way for too long. So if really you have no content, you'll easily be caught because the why and the mission of the organization is very straight. So that's one of the ways to attract your talent. Be very strong and clear about your why. Then, as you get into the market and as you engage, referrals. The reason why you go eat at cafe, for example, is because a friend told you their food is fantastic. So already by that level, 50% at cafe has won. Now, if I ask you about, for example, Kalamata, then you're saying, I'm not sure about their food. I've never been there. It's already lost 50%. So ideally, also trying to get into other players in the field, understanding what other people are doing, understanding where the other, what you call companies you admire, who they hire and who they are recommending also does help in terms of taking the right talent. But for me, getting the why right, getting the purpose right, people will come. You'll get the right people. People fear being held accountable. So if your why is shaky, you'll get shaky people because they can bluff around and bullshit their way into the organization. So ideally for me, that's very important. So it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It doesn't matter whether you're local or from external. It doesn't matter because medicine in UK, medicine in Kenya is medicine. The bond remains the same. It doesn't change, right? If it's accounting, principles of accounting remain the same. The point is just what's your attitude for working? How do you think? You know, are you willing to be accountable? Are you responsible enough? And that comes, if you're not, you can't follow someone who's very clear in terms of what they want to do. Yeah.
Definitely agree with that. I guess having a culture that attracts those people and in turn your tribe will find you, right? So I want to throw that same question back to Kosen. You have a lot of portfolio companies, early stage into growth and scale stage. What have you seen that has worked when it comes to growing your people?
Yeah, so I think I echo a lot of what's been said. I think it is largely around your vision and people buying into that. I think it's to be a CEO, I think you need to actually inspire that confidence, inspire people to actually want to follow you. This is a very uncertain path. I think it's not the same as being like getting into a big corporate with a lot of stability. It's a very uncertain path. To attract the best talent, I think that's the challenge we get. You need somebody with that mindset. So I think to put it into context, when you're trying to get the best people, these are people who they don't need you. Like they don't need the work. Like they're not necessarily, a lot of the times they're not necessarily just floating around and looking for work. It's people that are literally in corner offices in some very big organizations, or just they have the ability to work anywhere. And then the question for them is, why should I take a bet on you? And now you need to be able to actually sell this vision. And again, but it's kind of ways because you need people also who buy. Because of course, at the beginning, you can't match their salary. Whatever they're earning, wherever they are, you can't give it to them. Maybe it's equity. Equity means nothing unless this thing is successful. So they need to actually believe and have that mindset and be open to actually taking that leap of faith. And a lot of it is on you to inspire that. So you need to also check yourself and also assess yourself in terms of, if this is a ship that I think is, or a rocket ship, let's say rocket ship, I don't want this thing to know that it's ending, like landing in the ocean. So you need to also inspire that confidence that this is somebody I want to tie myself to the hip for the next 5, 7, 10 years, no matter how it goes, that this is somebody I believe could actually get this across the finish line. But on the other side, you also want people that are passionate about the problem that you're trying to solve, that they actually care about it, and that will actually make, because I think there's nothing I think that's harder than actually trying to just build a startup, and at the scale that, for instance, us as venture capitalists will be thinking, like there's nothing tougher than that. The odds are stacked against you. Power law dictates that a lot of people will fall along the way. So it's not an easy sell. So you need to kind of have that alignment where they can see in you that this is somebody I could work with and get to this crazy vision, and then at the same time, they understand what they're signing up for.
Yeah, that's definitely relatable, and it relates to also something that you mentioned around interviews. And I find that when I'm sat in an interview looking for talent, I find that the person I'm interviewing is also interviewing me, right? Because if they're not a fit for me, it's my business that takes the hit. They can leave my company and find a new job that gives them what they want, but then I would have to spend more money to fill that role. So it's always kind of a two-way conversation there. So as we wrap up this session, I guess my final question to you both is, what unique role can the diaspora play, can we play, in championing these work opportunities back home? How can we bring people back home? And it doesn't have to be permanent, right? You don't have to completely kind of move and stay there forever. It's about finding what works for you. And I guess I'll be speaking from a POV of kind of a startup life and also from enterprise as well.
Thanks for that. So in terms of what the diaspora can be able to do, I know we've spoken about a lot of capital, we've spoken a lot about coming to the country and starting startups, but when you think about it, there's a lot of workforce that does live in Kenya and also in Africa. And like what Dr. Ali said, it's not so for Kenya, it's also for Africa. So there's a lot of workforce that is there. But then what lacks from that workforce is probably a lot of trainings, a lot of understanding of things that they can be able to do. People have a lot of potential, they have ideas, but they don't know how to put them together. Now, if you look from the diaspora perspective, then what applies there? There's a lot of experience that you to be able to gain. So other than just money, you can also give capital in a different way. You can give capital in terms of time. You can give capital in terms of training. You can give capital even from a crowdfunding perspective, but then that perspective is not just about money, but also training people. There's also a lot of resources locally. So I think one of the ways that the diaspora then can be able to help is how do you pass down this particular knowledge so that even if you are to come back to the country as a returnee, then you have something to come back to. So I was in a panel about power at one point, and people were discussing about, when you think about it, is you find in a village where you live, everyone is trying to get electricity. Everyone is carrying a course around getting electricity. Now, if you came together, and interestingly, it was about power and diaspora. If they came together and said that we are going to put an electric plant, power plant, whatever it is, as diaspora contribute, and then we gather every household there to be able to get electricity, and from that village, then we employ the people locally there. So what they have basically done is bringing the know-how, bringing themselves together, putting that plan together to solve a problem for the village and employing the village that is existing. So you're still making revenue and solving a problem for the community. So those kind of projects, initiatives, then would really help to ensure that you are upgrading the place you want to go back home when you get back home. The other thing also is we have second generation, third generation kind of returnees, so to speak, right? They're not returnees per se because they probably never visit the country. I'll give you a story. I was speaking to a lecturer who does psychology in Catholic University, and he says that he's getting 10 students who have been sent from the UK to come to Kenya to understand the culture. But the lecturer who teaches them in the UK is using photos for when he was last in Kenya in 1963 to teach them about Kenya. Now, can you imagine the shock when those students land here? I mean, in their minds, they probably come in and thinking, you're wearing sisal, right? You don't have shoes, and there's no electricity, no water. Then they just come and land. So from a diaspora perspective, it's telling the story of what has happened in Africa and how it has changed. So that even anyone who's thinking of coming back to Africa is understanding, I'm not going to a primitive, so to speak, land. I'm going to a place that also there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of development, and things are moving, and opportunities do exist. I think those are the two ways that the diaspora would really help to bring back. So even those second generation, third generation want to come back and bring their know-how, their knowledge, like I said, capital is not just money, different ways of capital into their country, understanding that there's no big difference between the tarmac here and the tarmac in the UK. It's the same.
Thank you. Kosen?
Yeah, maybe I'll answer just a bit differently because, of course, I'm working on the assumption that the diaspora does have that desire to actually plug back home. And again, there's so many ways. It could be capital, it could be your expertise, it could be time, as Andrew said. But I think the question, how I feel they, again, maybe the own. It's like the Oscars, they're just winding me down, I guess. And yeah, I think the onus is maybe on ecosystem enablers and the guys who are now creating these forums for people, because you don't know what you don't know. So you're just maybe sitting in the UK and you're thinking, I want to plug back in, I don't know how. And there's so many different initiatives. That's why this is so important, the work people like Jessary Network and Nancy do in terms of building that bridge where we can now bring all these ecosystem enablers together so that we understand, like, do you know that Safaricom, for instance, has been now venturing into CVC? Do you know Antler is there that you could actually engage with them in terms of now going through a program to actually go to market or really ideate from literally the earliest stages. Do you know you have KPMG also providing a lot of, so I think we will work really closely with them in terms of even the bridging, the legal requirements, the tax implications. There's just a lot of help out there. There are a lot of people who are making efforts and develop the ecosystem. And yeah, the question is, can we find ways to keeping us having this conversation, bringing us all into the same room, and just creating those linkages and networks so that we can just keep the conversation going. And then I think the doors will appear. More conversations you have, the more ways you can see you can plug in with your unique value add into the ecosystem.
Thank you so much for that. And I think what you touched upon was quite powerful. I think even since the pandemic, Nairobi has completely changed, right? The skyline has changed, the business presence has changed, and as government changes, also the way business is being carried out has also changed. And it's definitely attracting a lot of talent. There's a reason why, I think it was last year, Kenya as a whole, raised the most VC compared to like other hubs. So that's West Africa, South Africa, and so on. And that just tells you how much opportunity is there and people are seeing it. And now it's for us on the ground to attract more capital, right? Because that's how we get put in the map, and that's how we get seen. So thank you. Round of applause for my panelists, everybody. Thank you so much.